So John, how are you gonna follow that one up?
I don't know that I can.
Any bike rides?
Not that long. No.
Are you on camera?
I hope so.
Me too.
Let me rephrase that. I hope not. David asked me to come up and talk a little bit about my time in journalism, which to me only sounds really interesting if I can talk to you about the current state of journalism, how we got here, and what I've seen in my time. So, obviously, I am not the longest person in journalism that you're ever going to meet. I've only been doing this, depending on how you count it, 24 or 25 years. I started at my family's from southern Indiana, but I grew up, we had moved to Ohio. I started at the Daily Jeffersonian right out of high school. It was our hometown paper in Cambridge, Ohio. I took photos for them. I did sports writing. It was the worst sports writing ever because I didn't know the rules of basketball when I started writing sports. And on baseball, my big trick with baseball, which I also didn't really understand, was to just ask the coaches, what do you think happened? Tell me what you think happened. It always worked because coaches always know what they think happened. So I then joined the Navy. I joined the Navy because they had two enlisted jobs I was interested in. One was the journalist and one was the photographer's mate. Never got into either of them. I got out 7 years later without doing a lick of journalism. The whole time I was there. I went to college. At the time I got stationed in Fallon, Nevada. I went to college at the University of Nevada, Reno, where I met my wife. We got married at about the same time. I got my first full-time journalism job at the Nevada Appeal in Carson City, Nevada. So I've been putting up with journalism. My wife has been putting up with journalism for about 24 years. So I've been putting up with it for 25. I worked at papers, the Carson City paper twice, and they also owned some papers at Lake Tahoe. I did that for a while. When we had our son, we moved back here to Indiana. I worked at the Shelbyville News for a while, and then I was at the Republic. I got hired when Bud was publisher, as a matter of fact. I was there for about 14 years. I left the Republic, went into radio news. That's my day job now. I'm news director for all the White River broadcasting stations, WCSI, WKKG, The River, and Win 104.9. So little advertising there. And then I also had been there for about 6 months, and then I started talking to Larry Simpson, and he offered me a part-time job in my free time up here at the Hope Star Journal. So what do all these have in common, and what does this mean about journalism today? Well, let me tell you. I did a little bit of research yesterday. I called up my hometown newspaper back in Cambridge, Ohio, and it's the Daily Jeffersonian, dailyjeff.com, and it has been bought out by Gatehouse Media now. All the newspapers, since I've been there, when I started there, it was a family-owned newspaper. At some point, it became a small chain of newspapers, and then it got bought out by Gatehouse. So Gatehouse is one of the giants in the newspaper industry right now. They have 144 papers around the country, including just within the last 6 months or so. They bought all the Schurz papers, like the Bloomington Herald Times. They also bought the Kokomo Tribune and all those papers. The Nevada Appeal, on my very first day as a full-time employee, we got bought out. So that was a scary way to start my career. On my very first full-time, they had been owned by a small family called Mount Rose Publishing. Mount Rose is the big mountain that looms over Carson City. They were bought out by a small chain called Swift. They are still owned by Swift, which I was surprised to find out. The Shelbyville News, I've been there about a year. Family-owned newspaper, the Depre family. They were great to work for. They really were focused on journalism. However, the family was divided. The generations had gone on, and the younger generation had no interest in continuing, I understand. So the Depre family sold the papers to Paxton, and Paxton owns, as near as I can tell, about 30 papers around the country, 32. I was at the Republic, and when I was there, it was owned by the Brown family, Home News Enterprises. About a year and a half after I left, they were bought out by the Brown family, sold again, situation where, as I understand it, the younger generation didn't want to continue keeping the newspaper running. They were bought out by AIM, which is based out of Texas. They now own all the former Home News Enterprises papers, including the Franklin Daily Journal, the Seymour Tribune, the Hope Star Journal, family-owned newspaper, obviously, for many years. And then with Larry's passing, he passed a month after I started working with him. So my last family-owned newspaper. Luckily for me, I'm working for a radio group that is a family-owned radio group. They actually do have newspapers in Ohio, where they're based. They've owned the radio stations here for 50 or 60 years, so they're well established in the community. And every day I'm just kind of thankful that I get to continue working for a family-owned news organization. But if you haven't been keeping track, the ability for small-town, family-owned newspapers to keep operating is not going well. Our newspapers are being consolidated by bigger and bigger fish, or biting up the smaller fish over and over again. As I said, Gatehouse owns 144 papers. Digital First owns 56. Gannett owns more than 100. Over here in Greensburg, they're owned by CNHI, which has more than 100 community newspapers, and they were bought out last year. They had some sort of merger with a company called Raycom, and now they want to split off all the newspapers and get rid of them and sell them off to somebody else and just keep their other media properties. Which kind of leads me to the threats that we're looking at on journalism. There is a real danger right now in losing small-town community journalism. They call it news deserts. It's places where you can't get any local news because nobody's writing it. There are many pressures that are causing that, but see if you may have heard this story before. These giant hedge funds, like the Digital First folks, are buying up a newspaper, and they don't care about journalism. All they care about is the fact that there's a building they can sell, there's a printing press they can sell, there's property they can sell. Next thing you know, they've gotten rid of all those things, and they are operating out of a rented building somewhere. They've gutted their newspaper staff, and they're just hanging on with just a little bit of breath left in them. And I'm not saying they're not doing good journalism. I'm just saying it's much harder than it used to be. One of the trends that, in addition to just the pure, in my opinion, greed that is leading these companies to just strip mine these small newspapers, is the confusion over the digital aspect. I mentioned before, digital is overtaken. If you combine websites, news websites with social media, it's more people will get their news that way than they do on television, which leads into a situation where a company that doesn't care about journalism is suddenly very powerful in journalism. You have a situation where newspaper publishers throughout the country, have tried to keep their companies going by doing the bidding of a company like a Facebook, where Facebook tells them what people want to read, what people don't want to read, that they want to watch videos. And so you see all these companies that have already strip mined their news staff. They're at the bare bones. And they turn around and they tell them, you've got to get rid of all those reporters who are writing your stories and get videographers who are going to tell video stories. And there's a controversy right now that Facebook, while promising that it was going to bring all this money to these publishers, they were lying about how many people were watching them, grossly exaggerating how many people watched those videos and how many people cared about them. And so the newspapers, they've lost all that money, the new revenue didn't come in, now they're getting rid of the video people. One of the problems with a newspaper or a news organization that's what we call chasing clicks, that just wants to find out how to make the most money by people clicking on their website and seeing their ads, is that it has a notable decline in the amount of local journalism they actually do. Because if you're counting clicks, all you really care about is what people are clicking on. You don't care what it is. It's even worse in the fact that there is a pressure to stop caring about the things you should be caring about if you're trying to do local news, and instead you're going to be driving people to click on things that are frivolous, have nothing to do with your local community. There was a study done out of the University of Alabama, I was just reading about it. Newspapers that are focused on clicks, 25% of their stories are what you would call civic journalism, where they're actually going out and writing about the communities where they're based and covering government meetings and talking to officials and what's the Chamber of Commerce doing. Newspapers that are not focused on clicks are doing 33% of their stories about those sort of bread and butter issues. And one of the quotes that I thought was really depressing was a quote that said, from one of the reporters at those papers, said, if nobody's reading it, why pursue it? So the newspaper says, nobody really cares what your town council's doing. Why are we writing about it? If we don't get good metrics off of it, we're not going to cover it. And obviously that doesn't serve communities very well. Further complicating it is the problems we have with Facebook and their algorithm. I was at a conference a little bit over a year ago, and at that time, Facebook had just tweaked it. Facebook decided that even if it's real local news from your community, people don't want to see that. And they have tweaked their algorithm so that you see more cat pictures and family pictures and fun stuff. Even if you specifically say, I want to follow this news website, they end up just pushing it further and further down. I've seen this in my own life. We had a tornado warning about a year and a half ago. A tornado was on the ground. I believe it was in Jennings County. And we thankfully we have a bunch of 50,000 watt radio stations I can get the word out on. I put it out on Facebook. Facebook didn't show it to anybody. You could see the stats. Facebook said, "Oh, we showed it to 3 people." It's not important to them. It doesn't matter to them. And it's not making them any money. The last threat that I see at journalism right now is the whole idea of fake news. You hear about it a lot. I just want to say that journalism has never had a great reputation. There may have been periods during the Pentagon Papers where, in the Watergate, where everybody thought journalists were great, except for the people who absolutely hated journalists, which was about 50% of the country. Somebody once called journalism a bunch of ink-stained wretches, and I can't figure out who that was, but I always kind of took that as a badge of pride. So I enjoy covering the local news. I enjoy covering the local council meetings and what the Chamber of Commerce is doing and getting the news out there. Our writers are dedicated to doing it. We are all about local news. You're not going to find a whole lot of bizarre fluff that just might drive some clicks to our website. We're not interested in that. And even though I don't deal in ink anymore, I still consider myself an ink-stained wretch. So that's my journalism journey.